Jeff, this is Erik. We're
Hello.
here to Steelman some arguments.
I like this. This is the most fun conversation I've had in a long time, just trying to take the other side of the story and provide the best version of an argument that perhaps we disagree with. So what do you want to talk about today?
Hold on. Before we get into that, I want to tell them why you're relevant here. Why are you talking about this? And
I don't know.
Erik's relevant because he's an executive. He's managed big teams. He's managed small teams. He's done it over 15 years, and he's done it with the biggest, baddest group there is these days, who are job hopping more than any other group has ever job hopped before software developers.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, my background is in product and operations. Jeff here, also a fellow executive. We've been at a couple companies together, done some consulting together. But Jeff comes from the sales, marketing, operations side of things. So together, we almost make one mediocre executive.
I'm shooting for average, Erik.
Okay, there we go.
Let's talk about this. I've got one for us today.
Okay.
Sales has always been remote. So we're used to managing remote. We're used to working remote. We like to shake hands, but we've been remote for a long time. Over the last 2 years during COVID, a lot of departments went remote, but now we want to bring them back. I want everybody in the office full time. Tell me why I'm right.
That's interesting. So why do you want to bring your team back to the office, office, physical co-location, and you're going to bring everybody back?
Dang straight. I want them all in person.
Yeah. Well, part of this is probably just natural reaction to kind of post-pandemic, if we can even say that. I don't know when that's going to happen, but like we haven't seen our coworkers for a long time. It's only natural to think like, let's get everybody back into the office. But what you're talking about really is we're going to create a policy to mandate that our employees come back to the office and spend time in the office versus the last 2 years of fully remote work, right?
Yes.
Okay, so why would we want to do this? The best reasons for wanting to bring people back to office. Obviously, my intuition is this is a bad idea, so I'll rack my brain here for a minute and think of some good reasons to bring people back to the office. Let's see. Well, the first thing that comes up, spending a lot of time doing Agile and Scrum. One of the foundational ideas here is the Agile Manifesto, and one of the 12 principles of the Agile Manifesto is that people do their best work when they're communicating face-to-face. That was true in 2001 when it was written. It's true today. And I don't think that we're ever really going to get away from that, at least not in the next 10, 20, 30 years. The most effective and efficient form of communication is always going to be face-to-face communication.
Hold on. Let me close down my solitude real quick because you said that. We're face-to-face right now.
Yeah. So, in 2001, when the Agile Manifesto was written, think about the things that we had as opposed to face-to-face communication. What we had: email, an internet chat room, maybe text messaging or AOL Instant Messenger, or maybe the early versions of Skype. I'm not sure what years some of these products came out, but we certainly didn't have Zoom, Slack, Discord, group chat, SMS and MMS. Like we didn't have these more rich ways of communicating. So now, 20 years later, we can approximate face-to-face communication. We're doing a pretty good job right here. But the one thing we don't really know that we do sometimes know, or we have a better chance of knowing, is if we're all in the same room, is whether or not we're all on the same page and paying attention. I can kind of see your facial expressions right now, but I don't know if you're tapping your foot in anxiety. I don't know if a toddler's pulling on your shoe. I don't know if your dogs are going crazy in the background. It's not quite the same, even though this kind of high resolution video is pretty good. So I think you can make an argument for that.
Let's talk about one of my favorite things that happens in meetings is when an idea is spun or given or brainstormed and you're getting it out there. And two people make eye contact, and right there's instant communication of, oh, we got this. And you can't do that. Zoom in every time I've been staring at the camera, I'm like, look at me, look at me, look at me. You can't do it. And there's no way to have that instant connection you have with someone. And one of my favorite things is even when, we do this a lot in sales of those crazy developers that come up and tell us all the things we can't do, and all the salespeople look at each other like, oh, come on. Now, obviously, I'm kidding there, but that's a form of bonding in those meetings. That's a form of relationship building that you can't do on Zoom. Yeah. So I'm bringing them all back.
Yeah, I like that. To add to this argument, I'm going to put up a graphic here. One of the interesting things that's happened over the pandemic is, and you and I have experienced this. We used to see each other in the building once in a while. We'd have 30-second or 3-minute conversations that figured out a lot of things that we had to figure out. But as soon as everybody went remote, one of the things that happened here is those 3-minute conversations had to be scheduled. And all of a sudden, our calendars are full of half-an-hour appointments to have 3-minute conversations that otherwise would not have required a meeting in person. And we can see here that over the past couple of years, the number of in-person meetings here has just gone up and up and up. It seems like we get a week respite from meetings during the Christmas week here every year. But other than that, the number of meetings that people have had has gone up and up and up. And I think that if I were looking at that as an executive, I might say, hey, if everybody came back to the office, we could unburden our folks from having to go to all of these extra meetings that I'm assuming that they don't like and isn't the most valuable use of their time. It's part of structuring your day now because we're all remote.
I hear you. So because you get random one-offs and I can just walk over and talk to you, then before now I have to schedule something so we're both on at the same time. Let me ask you this, and here's one that I love. I'm a manager. I need to see my people working to make sure they're working.
I don't have any really good response for that. If you're a manager and you have to see your people working in order to do your job as a manager, you just need some different tools, right? You don't actually have to visibly supervise people. That's just not in our toolkit in 2022.
I find it interesting that you regard that as a tool. I think that's an interesting way to frame it.
Not in 2022.
I don't think it was ever a tool. In fact, I think it was a way to give you confidence, because seeing someone work isn't the same thing as them actually working. And
Right.
By the way, if your job is to watch somebody work, maybe you should just do the job, because now we got two people to do the job of one. But that's neither here nor there.
Right. And it's a dangerous. I want to say one more thing on that. It's a dangerous path to thinking that what you as a manager are looking for is activity. Right. And we're not looking for activity. We're looking for outcome. And if we are measuring activity by what's that old phrase, management by walking around? Do you remember that? Where it's like people would just walk around and see people working in a building.
Yeah. And I do want to clarify something here, because I know you are Agile and Scrum, and therefore you don't know the foundations of Agile and Scrum, which is lean and total quality management. But there is something to say to go forth and see. But you go forth and see it's with the purpose of improving your employee situation, not to monitor and make sure they're working. I'm going to go forth and see and have reasonable, effective conversations. I'm going to go forth and see with a plan of how to improve their lives and improve the work.
Yeah.
And there's a distinction there that I do want to say. Yes.
Yeah, huge difference between the ethos of Lean's Gemba or go see the work and this idea that you need to physically supervise people or watch your people work. Two very
huge difference there. Wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
So Erik, you mentioned something in our huge 4-hour-long pre-production meeting for this call, which talks about from an employee perspective, why do I want to go into the office?
Well, one of the things that I found interesting reading a couple articles about this, and I'll post this article when we post this conversation. Hey, look, the way that we construct our companies and the way that we do things like reward employees is highly biased towards relationships. And I think that if half of your organization is going back to the office and the other half is working remote, I think that our generally speaking, our system of HR and performance management and promotions and salary increases, we're just going to see it reward the people that are in the office, not out of spite, not out of any bad faith actors, but just because we as humans are more apt to build relationships and see what's going on and remember what's happening physically around us versus remote work.
But that's not fair. Let's just promote the people that have more activity and more green dots by their name longer period of time.
Well, funny enough, one of the things that happens that a lot of companies have done over the past couple of years is try to figure out ways to physically supervise, in quotes, their employees while they're remote, right? And they install all sorts of systems to try to see whether people are active or not. And that's actually one of the remote work traps that companies fall in. We spend a lot of time figuring out if people are actually working remotely instead of enabling them to work remotely. So we get stuck at the supervision level instead of
that's a big difference. What do you mean by enabling people?
Yeah, so I'm going to bring up one more graphic here and kind of show. I think we did a pretty good job of steelmanning this argument, right? But before we go into why you shouldn't do this or why you should consider the trappings of doing this, the steelman version of working in the office is that it's just better communication, and no amount of high definition video or audio equipment is going to replace that. The other reason is, although it can approximate it for sure, and the other reason is that our systems of governance and promotion and HR and organizations are really aligned to being biased towards in-person work. And if you're going to do remote work, you're going to have to rethink some of that. And especially if you're going to have a hybrid environment where some people are remote and some people are in the office, you really have to think through kind of the ingrained bias that exists there.
So I want to talk through that for a second. One, I think we do have one other reason. Okay. We're on a meeting, we're doing something that's important, and there's now a distraction in the background, right? Your dog. Now, it doesn't bother me and you, we're dog people. Yeah. I can work with my dog barking all day long, but somebody on the meeting might be distracted by that. I think that goes to a function of the face-to-face in the relationship. But that's a case I've heard, and I'm going to summarize our argument and come back to that one. So we really have a couple different points of why you come back to the office. Relationships get built better face-to-face, period, the end. There's nothing to replace that. There's nothing that can even come close to the idea that if I get stuck, I can lean over, look you in the eye and say, I need help.
Yep. We can approximate it. We can approximate it way better in 2022 than we could even a couple of years ago, but it's still, we're decades away from kind of replacing face-to-face communication with something that is just as pure.
Yeah, and it's just like a bunch of people are trying to knock off Knob Creek whiskey. They ain't doing it. It's not the same thing. I can drink it. It's tolerable, but it ain't my Knob Creek. And that I think is key to this. The second argument is for the individual. Because of those relationships, you have a better opportunity of being promoted. Now, the reasoning behind that is management and leadership still has a failed, so to speak, meritocracy system that isn't very good at getting to the heart of who's making the most impact in their system, what's system related, what's bias related. Most companies don't have a good system for that. So the idea that you wouldn't be in the office is a disadvantage in those situations.
Yeah, that one really is we recognize if you're bringing your employees back, you should recognize that you're trying to treat everybody equally, and having a hybrid work environment. Maybe your management team and the skills around performance management just aren't up to snuff with managing a remote workforce. It's a new and different skill, and that's okay to say that we just don't know how to do that yet. So for now, everybody's coming back to the office.
Now, I would take the argument that we don't know how to do performance managing in the office either, but that's another argument that we can say for another day.
We should steelman performance management systems. Let's write a note on that one.
Yeah, we'll hold that one. Here's the real question. What is a better system? What should we be doing?
Yeah, so let me bring up this graphic. This is from Matt Mullenweg, who's the CEO and founder of Automatic, the company that does WordPress. And this is kind of, you can read this kind of like Maslow's hierarchy, I guess, where we start down at level 0, which are just types of work that cannot be done remotely. So think of something like a barista or something, or a massage therapist, right? Like there's just certain things that you can't just zoom in and get your job done. You have to physically be there in person. Let's skip those because most of the companies that we're working with are somehow technology product, high-tech companies where that
or service-based that can be done.
Right. Or like the majority of the company is knowledge work, and then they end up manufacturing something at the end, but the majority of the company is knowledge work. Well, before the pandemic, where most companies existed is in level 1 or 2. And what I've found, in my opinion, is most companies during the pandemic have tried to go from level 1 to level 2. And the thing that we see here is basically the level 1 and 2 are basically being forced to work remotely without ever having a thought through what it takes to work remotely, right? We're still using email with reply all to 35 people. We don't have a Zoom account. We don't have a way to securely have people quote unquote dial into work from their home office or on an unsecured network. There's all sorts of barriers that happen if we haven't thought through how people can work at home. And that's what we get to. And then a lot of companies try to get up to level 2, where we start providing some of these tools. I think most companies have done a pretty good job of buying Slack, buying Zoom, things like that, to allow people to work remotely. But it kind of stops there. And this is kind of where a lot of companies start getting worried about remote work. And at the same time, we see companies buying tools for their employees like Zoom and Slack and whatever else. We also see companies installing monitoring software and companies trying to measure the productivity of remote workers, basically trying to do the same, but trying to proxy for the walking around the office building and watching your people work that you can't do now. And I think you and I would agree that all of that is waste. Above that, there's a couple really interesting things that I don't think companies are thinking of. Level 3 is being remote first and distributed. So this level 3 on this hierarchy means that companies are actually trying to get their employees, enabling their employees to think about doing their job remotely always. Even if there's an office that you might come into once in a while for various reasons, we're going to set up the company to be remote first. We're going to send people high quality webcams and microphones. In addition to buying Zoom and Slack and all of these other tools, we're going to give people a nice work desk and computer and setup at home. We are going to care about people's home office environments to the same degree and dollar value that we cared about building our big corporate headquarters, right? We're going to actually enable our employees to work from home. Above that, the big change that companies have to make, and this is probably one that we can table for another day also, is actually going asynchronous. So levels 1, 2, and 3 are still about doing synchronous work. You and I are working remotely from opposite sides of a city, and we're collaborating together from 9 to 5 Central Time every day. But a lot of teams aren't structured that way. A lot of companies aren't structured that way. So the next thing that companies have to try to attack is actually doing work asynchronously. And that's where you really have to think about the tools that you're using. And certain things that are ubiquitous right now, like email, don't make a lot of sense anymore. We have to figure out ways to take our shared understanding of the project that we're working on and transfer that to the folks in Europe and the Middle East and Asia as we go home to our families at night and they wake up and take up our project for us. That asynchronous element is much harder to achieve.
I want to jump in here, and I think all of this is interesting, except for I don't think it's the right place to start. And I think the right place to start is actually more difficult for companies. And that is doing a value stream map and understanding where and how value is created for the customer or the client.
How's that going to help us decide whether or not to bring people back to the office?
Because now you're going to step back and say, what's the most effective, efficient way to get this work done? And then where are the trade-offs we can make it? And the reason I bring this up now and interrupted you when you're talking about asynchronous work is because that perfectly is fine. And look, sales has been working remote and asynchronous for a long time. And they're spread out across the country. They're used to remote meetings. They're used to having, way back when you would dial into a conference line and you would all report your sales. You do your sales pipeline meeting via a telephone. And there is some of that is vital for that type of work. So they've learned to work that way and create that value. However, what we've learned is that through my and your work together, the closer the sales and the value team, whoever was developing and creating the value, were aligned, the better off you were. And this is where I talk about the value stream map, is the idea of once you see this value stream map, there's certain tasks that are asynchronous and aren't time dependent and aren't interactive with other people. And then there's certain tasks that are not only you need your team, but you need people from different departments. And then there's certain tasks that have to be done in a certain time in a certain way, not because it's the most optimized for this little division, but because it's optimized for the whole. And that's where I think doing this work of value stream map, and then if you could pull that pyramid back up from a recruiting and value standpoint, now there's a the triangle, and we can talk about certain things where you have to balance out shareholder value with employee and client satisfaction, right? Those are 3 points. And so if you have the value chain, that's taking care of the clients. And if you go top down in there, now you're taking care of the employee in most situations, because that top down allows the employee to work wherever they want.
That's interesting. So what you said a lot there, but one of the things that I'm picking out of that comment is that, hey, look, if we are going to bring people back to the office, we might take this time as we're upending everybody's lives and making them commute in traffic again and all of these other things. Now might be the right time to really evaluate whether or not we have the right organizational structure, whether those structures and teams are aligned to customers and value production. Like, this might be the time to maybe re-architect our organization if we're going to bring everybody back to physical office.
I take great offense to that statement that you need an impending event to increase value. But now is as good as time as any, and this is something that should be done on a regular basis. If you haven't done, the best time to do it was yesterday. The next best time is today.
Especially when we think like the remote work thing gives me no concern whatsoever. I think people all over in all sorts of jobs can work remotely. The thing that really gives me concern, though, is the difference between remote work and asynchronous work. If you are truly going to have a team that can't hop on a video call like this at the same time of the day, then you need to massively rethink how knowledge in that team transfers from one person to another across time zones. And that, I think, is the really hard part. And if we can use this opportunity of getting back into the office to try to create teams that can be co-located, that can take advantage of that face-to-face communication. Because if what you're doing is bringing everybody back to your office in Chicago and then forcing them to work with a team who's half in Germany, half in India, and half in Japan, you're not getting anything better out of that situation by bringing people back to the office.
And therein lies, if you look at how the work needs to get done for that specific work, you're going to come to the best possible answer. And if you balance that with shareholder value, client value, and employee value, if you balance those 3 things, you're going to come to a decision. And one of the things that you and I talk about all the time is this idea of benchmarks and looking what everybody else is doing. And this is such a huge opportunity for people to do things differently. The benchmark and the average of what, IBM is doing. IBM would have been used in the 80s and 90s, or what Google is doing. None of my clients are Google. None of my clients have the brand name of Google. None of them have the attract of employees saying, I work for Google. You should not be learning from what Google is doing unless it directly applies to the situation for that work being done. If Google releases that, hey, groups of 4 software developers work better in this format, and you have a group of 4 software developers, maybe you can copy that.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't, because you're not, that is few and far between. So the thing that I would emphasize here is, the best way to look at this is look at how the work should be getting done. Look at the best possible way to do that work with that balanced triangle of employee, clients, and shareholder, and work with your team to come up with a good solution. And there's the part that you and I haven't talked about. Tell me how I should be working with my team to come up with a solution.
I think we're going to have to save that one for next time.
You're killing me.
I know. Yeah. Let's just give a couple points why you should seriously think about bringing people, whether or not bringing people back to the office is a good idea. I think we've mentioned this, but recruiting is crazy right now, especially in product, especially in tech. It is an employee market, and I don't think it's too much to say, too much of an extreme statement to say that companies that are forcing people back to the office are going to lose employees. They will get recruited away for the single purpose of they have arranged their life to be a remote first life, and they want that. Here's just another quick graphic I'll put up there, which is when people are working during the pandemic. And you can see here kind of there's a morning spike, mid-afternoon, lunch break, afternoon spike. There's also this really interesting thing happen where people are perhaps taking some time in the evening to do some family stuff. And then there's another kind of tiny spike there at 9 and 10 at night where they're finishing up some work. I don't know if this is a good or bad thing. For me, if this represents your day in and day out for months, I don't envy your job. But if this is more seen as an average of all the employees at a large multi-thousand person company, what I find interesting here is if you say we're coming back to the office, you are also saying there's a certain set of hours in which I want you to work.
That's nonsense. I want you to be in the office until the job is done.
Well, right.
You have to stay like
but what we've seen,
I want the best of both worlds.
And I think what we've always known, honestly, is that people don't do work from 9 to 5. And especially in product and sales and things like that, a lot of things happen outside of the office. And one thing that you might just want to consider is the work is still getting done. Do we actually need them to come back into the office? Especially when you look at a graph like this and you say, well, if I tell people they have to be in the office from 9 to 5, what happens to the rest of the work out here? And I'm not trying to say that this is a good way to get your employees to work harder. You know that's not my style. But you can look at a graph like that and say, hey, my employees are designing a work and a life that works for them. And if that means every day from 3 to 5, they're picking up their kids from school or coaching a little league team or exercising themselves or meditating or doing art or something, but then they're working from 9 to 10 at night, and that's what works for them. Maybe this works for the company too.
Yeah, and I think what we need, and this goes back to how the work and what that work needs to be, that conversation. Yeah. Because there are certain jobs that you should do when you're the most creative, and each person has a different moment when they're the most creative. There's different jobs that have to be done at certain hours because of time and pending events. There are different jobs that have different time demands and different ways of working. And then you have the individual that's different. And we have to know which one of those are. Now, I have a firm belief that says if you're not, the market has switched, and it's been switched for a long time. For the high producing employee, they've always been able to job hop, if you will, go find a better job. Now, what we've learned in the last couple of years is that's even been taken to the extreme. And what's happened is that if this employee can do it, we want them. We're not as against job hopping in the past. Right. And so what that's telling me is, as a leader, as somebody that has to recruit, as somebody that has to manage and keep a team together, I better be worried that they're not overworking themselves. Meaning, if I saw one of my employees with that graph, I'm going to them and saying, hey, look, this isn't going to work long term. We need you to turn some of that off.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm doing that proactively because I want them for 10 years. I don't want them to be most productive for 2 weeks. And so I think all of that is changing drastically. And there's a multitude of reasons why. But the underlying thing here, as a leader, as a manager, I've got to look at what work needs to get done, what's the best way to get that work done, and what's the best way to create value for my employees, for my shareholders, and for my clients, and balance that. And if I'm not doing that work, I don't have an answer for this.
Yeah.
But Google's going back to the office, so we are too.
I'm not sure if we've solved our back to the office problem or not, but at least we gave it a good try. Hey.
Well, I do think, and this is what we're trying to do this for, there is a nuanced argument. There's a good argument for saying go back to the office. And if you do that as a blanket statement and you don't fit Google or some of those other brands, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. So I think that's the place we got to, is there is no right or wrong answer here. It's highly nuanced to your situation.
Sure.
And that's why you hire Erik to come in and solve it for you.
Or Jeff. Let's leave it there for this week. We're running up against a half an hour here. That's good. Nice long conversation about a topic that a lot of people have some kind of quick hot takes, or they have a natural intuition about whether it's good or bad. I hope we've done it justice, kind of talking about both pros and cons of it.
You did this last week, my turn. Smash the like button, put in the comments why we're wrong. And the more you tell us, hey, last week I got a bunch of comments that said I was wrong. I loved it. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Please. We're not experts here. We just have intuitions, and we're battling. What we're trying to do here is battle what our intuitions are and actually have a conversation about the pros and cons of any given subject or idea, which I find extremely helpful.
Anyone that tells me they're an expert on return to office after a pandemic, I'm going to ask them if they were leading this during 1918. Like, come on. Nobody's an expert in this.
Yes. Return to the coal mines, return to the manufacturing lines. Yeah. Not
All
great.
right. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. We'll talk again soon.